guys, I am back with Katya and Alicia Holker of Hawkeye Consultancy. If you haven't checked out the first part of the interview, by all means, jump into the notes section and check that first interview out. But guys, I am very interested to find out your thoughts. Obviously, we have new standards coming out 1/1/25. We've had some of those standards already implemented late last year when it came to fit and proper, on the 1st of the 3rd this year when it came to some of the training and credential requirements. We are at the end of March and we still do not have an actual credential policy to see what the finalized standards are going to look like. Every interview of these I do, I go, surely by the next interview they will have released the standards, but no, still not there. But that's okay. But so what are your thoughts on the new standards? Knowing that, I mean, obviously you guys do a lot in the auditing, the re-registration sort of a space. What are some of the things that you're looking at in relationship to like adaptations, additions, that you're working with your clients in order to make sure that they're ready come that 1/1/25 mark? And I would assume doing registrations, you guys are going to be like 6 months ahead of the ball with any of those applications you're putting in as well.
It was interesting. We literally had a conversation about yesterday with the team how we were going to do out a roadmap to really ensure that we covered all aspects of the new standards, which we understand they're still in draft form, but at least there's some basis we can kind of work towards and prepare our clients for. So we'll likely start by rolling out our new suite of policies and procedures that our clients have access to if they wish to use. And then likely have to contextualize them with them. So we'll work with them to actually contextualize that to make sure it is appropriate to their delivery. And then from there, we'll the re-registration process has already changed, but that will also be updated. I think there'll be a lot of changes, particularly probably not so much for us because we already currently do this in our consultancy. But I would imagine there'll be a lot of changes around professional development and providing evidence of that when you go for that initial application, and particularly around the leadership clauses of the new standards. So that would be interesting. We're already currently doing that though. So as part of our initial application process, we train the CEO and all the relevant staff that they put forward. So we train them on the requirements of the standards, all of the different documents, and we schedule it in kind of quarterly PD sessions with them, and then they get a statement of attendance anyway. So that's already part of our process. But I would imagine that would change for others that aren't doing that. I think on that note, in particular, I think when re-registration is occurring for other providers, just making sure that they're really, I suppose, looking at the structure of their organization and making sure that those individuals that are in those positions of influence are really vetted with authority to do so. If they haven't been listed as a high managerial agent, it's probably best that you must be getting them if they have a level of authority anyway in decision making. But really looking at that senior management team and deciding, okay, does this role actually need the authority to make decisions in the operation? Yes. Okay, then they'll need to complete a fit and proper. And also it's a good opportunity as part of that re-registration or even on an annual basis for organizations to look at that fit and proper within their organization and determine if that role still needs that fit and proper or whether the role and responsibilities no longer require, I suppose, that level of authority. Some organizations, which I would probably recommend, should embed that into their onboarding process for those particular positions that they have identified that require the fit and proper. So I think overall with that particular requirement, I don't think it's going to impact any individuals that have no previous, I suppose, dirty laundry. And then those that may have an incident where they may have been part of the senior management team and the RTO did fall down. I think just making sure that they accompany some kind of form of evidence to say, yes, I was employed in this role, but this role had no authority and making it clear to ASCO that yes, they were part of the organization when that went under because of non-compliance, but their role in that position really didn't have any authority. So therefore, I think their fit and proper can remain somewhat of a high level. So yeah, and then I suppose what other changes are there?
Yeah, I think our templates around guidance, and particularly around the TAS, training assessment development, we'll have to put a lot of work in there in terms of to change the language potentially, and look at even just guidance on how to check things, so that making sure that that's really clear. And we do a lot of policies, procedures, but then we also have guidance documents that go alongside them, so teaching them what that document is, and then a checklist on how to actually check those documents. So that will need to work. And if people have those already in place, I would highly suggest that they go through those and review them. It's also a good time to go through it anyway and just review that, are my policies and procedures actually aligning to my practices? Is this what we're currently doing? And is there any areas for improvement? I know that we did the validation session, but it's one area that I'm quite interested in and passionate about is validation. So definitely looking at that ASCO's priority risk ratings, as I mentioned previously in that other webinar that we did, have a looking at those and really prioritizing what you're going to validate based on that, looking at the high risk qualifications, any work integrated learning and assessment, making sure that you're prioritizing those any high risk. So yeah,
volume as well, any units that you kind of have a large, if they're standalone or skill sets, making sure that you've considered them in terms of volume,
because they'll likely be selected for audit.
Yeah.
So when ASCO look at your data that you send through for your initial performance assessment, that comes through in the first request, they will ask to see your data, and they'll look at that data to see your high numbers, and they'll likely select a unit that is being delivered the most. It has the highest risk.
Absolutely. And because it's interesting, like listening to you guys talk about this. I was speaking with Angela McGregor last week about the new standards, and she said, I don't really feel like there's a lot of new stuff in there. She said, she goes, if you're running a good practice RTO, she said, you have engaging resources. She said, you have an education plan and a PD plan for all of your staff, not just your trainers. She goes, she said, so for me, I really don't feel like there's actually much change in there. She said, where the change is in some of the terminology, she said, and it's more an opportunity for RTOs that probably aren't really doing best practice in their RTOs. They're doing the bare minimum. She said that maybe the bare minimum has now been increased of like, you can't have crap training materials. You know what I mean? Like, and Angela probably wouldn't use that word, that's me, but like it's like listening to you guys, you're kind of, you've got like there's a similarity there in like, well, look, we go above the standards anyway. We already work with our clients to bring them to good practice, to bring them to better practice than the standards, which is technically the minimum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore for a lot of your clients, there's not going to be huge changes of, how they operate. It's just more the things that you guys are doing that are over and above are now a little bit more included within those standards.
Yeah, and changes in the policies really, I think, to the definitions and making sure they're defined and aligned.
Yeah, and I think that's a common conception across the industry. When we've talked to other consultants or other vet practitioners, everyone is pretty much at the same conclusion that if you were already being, I suppose, operating in a compliant manner and continuously improving on that particular item, that you were already meeting these requirements anyway. And I think the biggest thing maybe is the terminology, in particular, the section on well-being within support. And I think that's such a broad term. And like, what does that actually look like in practice? And when I've asked ASCO twice now, on
how does that look like for each organization? And then I suppose, yeah, I would love to hear maybe your opinion on it, Lauren, because I think it is a very broad term and it is very specific to well-being of maybe the demographics of a particular cohort. Is it well-being in terms of looking after them outside of their studies? Like what how far does the RTO have to go at well-being? And I think that particular terminology, there hasn't been much guidance on what that actually entails, and to the level that the RTO needs to support the student with well-being. Because but
I think that's to some extent on purpose, because if we look at, let's say 3 different RTOs. One is a Cricos RTO where most of the learners are with them for 2 to 3 years. They are brand new to Australia. They, probably it's their first time living away from home. They're in a completely new culture. There's already stuff within the RTO Standards to support learners anyway, but for that, well-being is going to have a fairly substantial, like the expectation of how you support well-being will be fairly substantive. You have another RTO that operates in an online context. All of the learners already hold multiple degrees or qualifications, and they're offering, skill sets or upgrades, for let's say, somebody who's got a business degree to get more specific training on communication or management or, TAE, for example, right?
Yeah.
But the cohort of learners is very mature, very well established. There's going to be a different requirement and impetus and expectation of what wellbeing is going to look like for that particular cohort. You've got a third RTO, which is a short course RTO, which offers white card, working at heights. Most of the learners are with them for maybe a maximum of 3 days. What is reasonable well-being? And that was when I was speaking with Mark Ratcliffe on this one. He goes, all of this is in context of what's reasonable. He said, and we have to really focus on that term, reasonable, because what is reasonable for all of those will be different. And I think one of the biggest changes that we'll see is going to be in the online space and the online RTOs. Mainly in and around progression, there needs to be a much stronger, one, the materials probably from an engagement perspective, but 2, from a learner progression perspective. I think that's probably where the big change is going to be. And then like our vet in schools RTOs where there's a lot of auspicing and a lot of, school-based traineeships and things like that, that might be where the RTOs can't just turn around and go, oh, well, they're in a school, so the schools will have that's responsible for managing. No, well, actually now you actually, I think, need to probably look at that component in a little bit more detail as well. So I think that's probably where the vagueness has to come into play, because, if they're with you for 3 years or 3 days, that's a massive factor. And if they're, 16 or brand new to Australia versus if they're a 50-year-old person who's in a full-time job and is undertaking this because they want to, again, what's reasonable? Like how do you define that?
It's exactly. Once an RTO has defined what that looks like for the particular cohort and their demographic, that they have a justification as to why that well-being is sufficient to meet their needs. So I think, and that will be in the TAS, or maybe it's in a support strategy, or so, yeah.
And the challenge is going to be for ones that are delivering multiple models to have different levels of care. And that's, so one of the things that I'm working out with one of my RTOs at the moment is we've got 4 very distinct cohorts that vary across that spectrum. Is it equitable under the legends, because that's another word that's now been brought into the standards? Is it equitable for me to say to you, well, if you're undertaking this service with us, this is the well-being that we'll provide to you. If you're undertaking this service with us, this is the well-being that we'll provide to you. And because I'm providing different levels of service to the people, being able to justify that that is still fair and equitable across those groups, I think that's from a legislative perspective, where you're just going to have to tread very carefully, I guess.
And that's probably a good opportunity for anyone that is going to be part of the pilot program to kind of nut that out. So if they can be part of the pilot program and just seeing, okay, well, this is what we're presenting, and then getting that feedback from the regulator in a safe environment where there are no repercussions to the actions. And then sharing that experience with the industry, so everyone else has a better understanding of, you know, what does that actually look like. So
they're going to do through their guides.
through their guides. I think the thing is the time, right? You're waiting for something that you're already subject to for the recent changes from the 1st of March. And I think there will be a time period there where there is no information or guidance. So I think if anyone does have that knowledge, like, please share it. Because the community overall will be better for it. So we're going to be part of the pilot programs as well, which is really good. And a number of our clients we've put forward to ASCO as well. So we'll definitely be sharing as much information that we get in relation to it, so that everyone is vetted with the knowledge to continue operating.
It'll be interesting how it will translate into audit. Like, what are they going to be looking for as evidence against the new standards? And we already, because there isn't that much change, we are aware of what they are already probably going to be looking for anyway. But I think even just those more specific items, or that motivation for learners, like, what are they actually wanting to see in an audit? And I think having exposure to that would be pretty good.
I mean, I'm making sure that isn't open to interpretation. Like it has been between previously between auditors. So I think that will be a real hard challenge for ASCO, like it always is, when they have to implement anything new or change. So just making sure that if people do have different audits at that point and they are exposed to different interpretations, that we're all kind of sharing that knowledge is key.
And that's a great point to stop on, because we are going to be talking next about what re-reg and audits do look like, and kind of giving our audience a little bit of information about sort of what that process looks like now. So we will pause just there, guys. If you like this video, please do like, subscribe. You can find all the information to be able to contact and follow Alicia and Katya down below in the comments section. My name is Lauren Hollis. I'm here with Alicia and Katya, and we will be back in just a couple of days, guys. Otherwise, you can follow the interview series and you'll get lots more good information. Thank you very much.
Bye.